Wedyn heno mae Jennifer a Mina yn awyddus i roi blas ac crynodeb o'r gwaith wnaethon ni llynadd ar y cyd yn edrych i fewn i'r sector wlân yma yng Ngwynedd yn benodol, ond wrth gwrs mae'n berthnasol i ardal ehangach, a dyma oedd y briff gafon ni y llynadd i baratoi adroddiad. Ac os fydda unrhyw un isio cael copi llawn yr adroddiad, mae modd i chi gysylltu efo Elin, a mi drwyth Elin e-bostio copi ohono fo i chi. Felly e-bost Elin ydy elin@mentermôn.com, a mi drwyth i e-bostio copi o'r adroddiad i chi. Felly mae oedd o'n brif eitha cynhwysfawr, ac o rwan tan wyth, mae Jen a fi'n mynd i roi crynodeb i chi. Dwi'n mynd i rannu bach o sleidiau, wedyn mae Jennifer yn mynd i fynd i fwy o fanylder, yn wedig yr ochr technegol o'r adroddiad. I just cael look ar y chat i weld os di sefydlu'n mynd o fanna. Oes da iawn, mae bobl yn rhannu gwybodaeth sydd yn braf i weld. Felly parhewch i wneud hynny, a wrach nawr ni mynd yn ôl i'r chat. Elin, os ti'n gweld cwestiwn, mae rhywun ar frys eisiau holi, a bob cyfri stopio fi yn lle bynnag ydw i, neu mae Jennifer, ond mi fyddwn ni yn hefyd yn clusnodi amser yn y diwedd cael sgwrs. Felly, cyn pasio rhywun ei Jennifer, dwi'n mynd i amlygu ambell i gasgliad ac pethau wnaethon ni ffeindio'r gwaith ymchwil yma i'r sector wlân, ac mi ddolyn ni ddiolch i'r llu o bobl nath gyfrannu, dyma detholiad o rhai ohonyn nhw, fel rhan o'r gwaith oedden ni'n cysylltu efo cwmnïau sydd unau'n defnyddio gwlân, crefftwyr, yn ogystal â ffermwyr ac proseswyr ac unrhyw rhanddeiliad sy'n rhan o'r gadwyn gyflenwi. Mi fuon ni yn cynnal goliaduron yn bennaf trwy ffonio, ond hefyd mi wnaethon ni gynnal digwyddiad yn y ganolfan ym Morth Madog, lle ddoth 20 o bobl at ei gilydd i rannu syniadau ac profiadau, a dwi'n ceisio meddwl beth yw'r ffordd ymlaen yn ogystal ac a cyfle i ddysgu bach mwy am y pwnc. A dwi wedi rhoi crynodeb i chi fyna rhai o'r canfyddiadau pryd o'n i'n holi bobl be oedd yn bwysig iddyn nhw pryd oedden nhw yn chwilio i bwrcasu gwlân ac yn y blaen ac i ddefnyddio gwlân, be ddoth yn amlwg iawn mae'r ansawdd y gwlân oedd y peth pwysicaf un un. Ac gysylltiedig efo hynny oedd y bryd, achos mae yna gysylltiad anorfod rhwng y bryd ac ansawdd y gwlân. Doedd y tarddiad Cymreig neu hyd oed tarddiad lleol ddim mor bwysig a hynny mi fydda fo yn darparu mantais. Felly'r negas amlwg o'na di fod ni angen, os datblygu rhywbeth, fod angen rhoid y pwyslais ar yr ansawdd, yn ogystal ac ansawdd y gwasanaeth hefyd. Mae lot o optimistiaeth, lot o bositifrwydd, lot o angerdd i'w deimlo yn y bobl fe ni'n siarad ar cwmnïau. Ac oedd y diwch efo'r heriau yn y farchnad, ond y bobl yn teimlo yna dal digon o le i obeithio am ddyfodol gwell. Dyma rhai o'r geiriau am y math o ddyfodol yn rhagweld i gwlân, pryd o'ch chi'n styried y pwysau am deunydd cynaladwy ac yn y blaen. Hefyd, oedd o'n amlwg hefyd yn ystod y gwaith, lot o waith datblygu y gadwyn i'w wneud efo gwlân. Yna nifer o bobl yn weithgar, wrth gwrs mae gennym ni ffermwyr sydd yn cynhyrchu gwlân, mae gennym ni hefyd gymuned brydfrydig o grefftwyr sy'n defnyddio gwlân i gynhyrchu bob mathau o gynnyrch gwahanol, mae gennym ni ddiwydiannau ysgafn sydd yn defnyddio gwlân mewn ffyrdd arloesol yn yr ardal hefyd. Efallai dydy pawb ddim yn siarad efo'i gilydd yn ymwybodol ei gilydd. Efallai fod angen herio agwedda ac meddylfryd sydd allan yna, ac dwi'n cynnwys fi fy hun fe hyn y sylweddoli pa mor aruthrol o glyfar ydy gwlân fel defnydd. Ac efallai dydy rhai o'na ni sydd yn rhan o'r broses o gynnyrchu ddim cweit y sylweddoli ac efo'r angerdd o ran gwachod ar ôl y gwlân, fod yna job o waith i wneud i drio ymgysylltu efo pawb o'r gadwyn. Wrth gwrs, mae yna ddadl i ddeud petai'r farchnad yn gryfach, mis a bobl rhoi mwy o sylw, wrth gwrs, i wlân. Oedd yn amlwg fod gennym ni stori bendigedig i rannu efo pobl ar farchnad, a treftadaeth gry iawn yn yr ardal yma efo gwlân. Felly mae hynny yn cynnig cyfleon marchnata hefyd. Ac yn ola, gen i basio i Jennifer, un a trafon ni hefyd yn ystod y gwaith, oedd yr adnoddau deallusol sydd yma ar stepan yn drws ni, mae gynna ni ganolfan profi gwlân ar gyfer hemisffer y gogledd reit yma yng nghanol yr ardal yn stad Cibin Caernarfon, a mi fydd rheolwr gyfarwyddwr y cwmni yna'n ymuno fyny yn y trydydd webinar. Mae gynna ni hefyd y ganolfan biogyfansoddion sydd yn rhan o Brifysgol Bangor, ac maen nhw'n gwneud gwaith arloesol yn datblygu gwerth i ddefnyddio'n cynnwys gwlân. A mae gynna ni, wrach ddim cweit yn hollol gywir yng Ngwynedd, ond yn agos iawn y ganolfan defnydd technoleg amgen yn Machynllath sydd yn arloesi o ran defnyddio cynaladwy i wlân. Felly mae gynna ni hefyd y cyrff yma sy'n bosib ychwanegu gwerth i drio ddod i fyny efo datrisiad ymlaen. Felly dyna chi rhyw fath o ragolwg o rei o'r uchafbwyntiau, a mi fydd Jennifer rwan yn mynd i fanylder pellach am yr adroddiad a'r gwaith nath hi y rhan o hwnnw. A mae'n fraint i gyflwyno i chi, Jennifer. Mae hi yn ymuno fyny o Gwlad yr Haf, fel o'n i sôn yn y cychwyn, ond mae hefyd yn sgolar Nuffield, ac mi nath Jennifer i adroddiad Nuffield nôl yn 2015, mi oedd Jennifer yn sgolar 2014 ac yn cyhoeddi adroddiad ar dyfu a marchnata gwlân, ac mae modd lawrlwytho adroddiad Jennifer o'r link sydd ar y sleid yn fanna. Felly mae bleser bod tro gweithio efo Jennifer, ac rwan mi fyddai'n pasio'r awyna, ac mi fydda'n wrach mynd yn ôl i'r Gymraeg pryd fyddwn ni'n trin a trafod cwestiynau ac ymweliadau. So a great pleasure to have you joining us tonight, Jennifer. So I will continue with the slides, and you might have to give me a nod, or maybe you'll have to tell me just move, because I don't necessarily see everybody, Jennifer.
Okay. So, hello, and can everybody hear me? Is this all working as it should do? Yeah, good. Thank you for that. We have a little joke that, you know, does anyone ever have a smooth Zoom meeting? I'm not quite sure yet. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of these 4 webinars. I'm really pleased to see the follow-up of the next 3 or 4 that are coming along. And I'm really hoping that tonight is just sort of going over what we did a year ago, but also leading into and developing some more expert sort of opinions on how you can take your sort of wool ideas further in the future. So as Geraint has, you know, sort of outlined, you know, we did a bit of work which was based around the brief. So we kept it as tight to the brief as we could. And I think, you know, what impresses most people when they are from the sheep industry, or whether they're as a crafter, or whether they're into product manufacturing, is that wool is it's kind of a primary resource. It's a primary ingredient to so many different products, and it's pretty hard to find an industry where you won't find wool. You know, obviously it's very commonly thought of as just a textile, but you'll find it in the building industry, you'll find it in medical, and you know, it's obviously very good in transport issues, and it's kind of in every industry. And what I always find really fascinating is that it's because wool has got so many natural attributes that you can take one of those and you can design a new, completely different product with those. And to highlight that amongst sheep farmers is just really fun, because there's nothing more sort of respected than the sheep. And certainly in Wales, you know, we know that Welsh have a really good, strong history with sheep, and that's suited to the land, and you've kind of evolved together, a bit like we have in England, but so it's certainly definitely in Wales. And to sort of bring that to the forefront of where we are in the 21st century. To highlight this, I kind of, when I finished my Nuffield, I was kind of wondering what to do, because education was still so important to me, as well as developing our own brand. I wanted to sort of share as much about my experience, and the fact that you can take wool as a primary primary ingredient and to make it into any products. And so these are my sort of wow boards, as I call them, and I take them to agricultural shows or schools or anywhere really. They are a travelling display and it's used to highlight all the different uses of wool in a very simple way. So these are the 10 reasons to love wool, which the campaign for wool designed about 10 years ago now, I think. And behind each one of these is a UK company that is using wool to create their product. And yeah, it's a good turning point. I would love to redo these boards because, you know, 10 years down the line, there is a lot more products available. And so we could really spruce these up again. But it just highlights all the wool's natural attributes. So I just think the more times we can share this, the more times we can get groups together thinking and talking wool, then, you know, the natural progression is always positive. So thank you. Can I have the next slide? Perfect. So as part of the research, we were looking at how important Wales is into the UK wool clip. And as you can see here, a lovely sort of lovely purple quarter of what the UK produces is grown in Wales. And, you know, when you compare that to the land mass between England and Scotland, Ireland and Wales, you know, it's really important that, you know, this 27% is marked and has a story that goes along with it. And I think that's what we decided. There's lots of ways that we can be using this 27% to grow, to provide lots of different products. Looking at your sort of British wool depot system that you've got in Wales, I guess, you know, most people will be aware that British Wool, formerly known as the British Wool Marketing Board, have kind of rebranded themselves as just British Wool. And they have depots up and down the country, and, you know, the ones that you have closest are sort of Newtown and Brecon. And these were the figures that of the number of kilos that went through each of these depots. Probably back in 2018, I believe these figures will be from, and it'll be very, very interesting to compare what is happening in 2020, but we'll come on to that later. Again, this is this 51 pence per kilo, looking at your top grade, or sort of your, you know, your standard Welsh price for your number ones there. It'll be very interesting to compare that to some of the data that we've got for this year's prices. And, you know, unfortunately, wool has, I think since about 2014, you know, people, farmers have been pretty upset with the prices that they've received. And obviously this year is just sort of way off the scale compared to that. But it even reminds me of sort of back in 2008, we were offered 12 pence a kilo for our fine Shetland fibres. And, you know, they're considered some of the finest wool in the UK. And at 12 pence a kilo, that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to be a price maker, not a price taker. So perhaps 2020 is a year that some good things will come, because it kind of almost takes a crisis to change the world. So, you know, my pint is always half full. So let's be optimistic about what happens when, you know, there is a pandemic and what good things can come out of it. But if we just continue on to the slides, I'm sure we'll get round to discussing that this year. I wanted to bring this into the presentations. I think there's quite a lot of misunderstanding about different types of sheep breeds and the quality of the wool and what that wool is really really useful for. So we have got this stratified sheep system, and you've got all of this going on in Wales. As we do on our farm actually. And so by understanding what the sheep has to look like to survive, she will grow a very different type of wool to from hill to lowland, and those products have different qualities. And as soon as we can understand that, we can then start designing a product which suits that type of fibre. So for example, you're looking at the hill and the mountain ones, they've got the Kemp fibre. The Kemp fibre is hollow and it's very, very insulating against trapping or keeping them sort of regulating their temperatures for cooler temperatures. If you compare that to the lowland, they're almost got a very dense fibre that they don't really carry much Kemp, and they're almost insulating against the heat of the sun, even though insulating is the same word. Some might be insulating from the cold and some might be sort of creating a barrier between the sunshine. And the upland, I always say, are more of the long wall types, and they're designed to drip rain, I think, in my opinion. So, you know, they're very good for some of your sort of textiles that require that drapeability. And again, you're looking at this slide here, it just shows you we've got fine, medium, long and other. And, you know, that's just 4 walls. If wool types. If you look at what we grow in this country, and particularly in Wales, you might have 150 different types of fleece that is grown, you know, in Wales. And, you know, there's some of these products, you can't put them all into insulation, and you can't put them all into carpets, and you can't put them all into textile clothing. So I think there's a really good format for learning about what wool types are, you know, suitable for. That's micron, but also length and strength and the sort of capabilities, how wearable they are, how long they would last if they were designed to be a carpet. You know, wearability can be how long it would last as a carpet, but also how long it would last as a sort of a jumper, if you like. Right up to some of the other products where they take it and they put it into the medical side of things. So we really, it's good to share information about these, and it's not for everybody, but I think if people are interested, then, you know, we can definitely bring that knowledge forward and get people discussing it. So this is one of the ways of adding value at shearing day. And for using my business as an example, because that's we sell our wool privately, and we've got quite a low micron sheep wool these days, which is down to about sort of 26 micron, which is really good for clothing. And for us to be able to add value, then what I want to be able to do is to create a processing batch where every single fibre is the same length and the same strength, and the same sort of micron. So the sheep would grow very different fibres on her body because it does very different things. And so the easiest bits to describe is the breech wool. So you can see on the back legs, it's sweaty, short, coarse breech wool. It's like that because she sits on it, and it's very hard wearing, which makes it sort of coarse. So if you remove those parts, then you're going to maintain that 26 micron across the rest of the fleece. But you also want to remove areas that might have excessive bits of hay and straw and grass seed and what's sort of collectively known as veg matter in the sort of processing industry. We want to be moving anything that's short, so anything around the jaw piece, the ear hole, the top knot. They are likely to have hair in them when that's taken off during shearing. And again, they don't spin very well. They're likely to cause sort of irritants next to our delicate human skin. So by processing it at shearing, and it's pretty hard to do this if you mix this all up and put it all into one big bag and try and do it after it's been washed, or even, you know, once it's been put into sort of a big bulky sort of sack. So I talk to a lot of people about this. I do training courses because I do believe that certainly hand spinners that are prepared to pay sort of upwards of sort of £15 a kilo for a very well sorted fibre, it's well worth investing in this knowledge. So, but it's not for every fleece, certainly. If you were making carpets, you really wouldn't need to be doing this, and insulation is the same. So I think, again, by understanding what the end product potential is of your particular fleece type, I think then we can avoid some of the extra costs that might not be necessary for your wool. Can we have the next one? Thank you. So part of our brief was everyone was very interested in washing wool, and washing wool is actually a very difficult process, and probably the most one that's really, really necessary, and can again determine the outcome of any finished product, because if you don't get this bit right, it can be left too greasy, and in which case it can damage some sort of spinning equipment. If you get the washing wrong, it can be felted, and then you're left with something that's really hard to continue to process in any particular way. And there's obviously massive environmental concerns around washing wool. I mean, it creates sort of upwards of 30 to 50% loss of weight between greasy wool and washed wool. So you can imagine there's quite a lot of stuff that comes out, which is lanolin, and then we've got suant, which is a mixture of sort of, I can imagine it's body fluids and grease and sweat and, you know, all the other parts that live in the fleece as well. And fly strike, as we all know in the sheep industry, I mean, it's a very, very difficult thing to control. And, you know, there is insecticides that get administered onto the fleece, obviously to protect the sheep while she's living, but those can end up on the fleece at processing stages as well. So it's very difficult to know how to advise people on washing wool. So we looked at this as an option. There is no Kiwi scours operating in the UK at the moment, I think, to my understanding. But this is something that popped up to me when we were looking at doing some research into, is it possible to bring scouring on a smaller scale into Wales, so that you could have Welsh wool, you know, processed 100% in Wales. And so the Kiwi scour is one option, and the other option is sort of a mini mill, which is, it obviously starts with washing the wool, which is down here sort of on the bottom right hand side, but a mini mill takes it beyond just washing, and then we go into sort of carding, and then we go into spinning, and then maybe there's some felting machines as well if people want to add that to it. And so the idea with a mini mill is very, very small volumes. I think they would be able to process up one fleece. I hear talk of sort of 6 kilos might be maximum per batch through the system. And they offer very, very small producers, or, you know, crafters, or people that have got some specific project in mind, the ability to have 100% traceability and transparency all the way through the processing chain with very small volumes. So yeah, this is what this slide is showing you. This is what you could install. There has been mini mills in Wales in the past, and it's always an option. Yeah. And so these are some of the wool washing equipment here. I mean, these look like they're sort of medium scale. So washing wool is generally done on a sort of with machinery. Hand washing, it just isn't that. It's not very water efficient, shall we say. So here I think we've got a wool washing machine, and then a tumble dryer, if you like. Again, the considerations that we have to take when you're looking at this sort of kit is the environmental impact for the waste, the energy required to sort of to run these, whether it can be run by renewables, the skill, the training that's required to be able to use these machines to their maximum output, and the price points. You know, are people actually going to pay for something as small as this system? So this looks like a carding machine. So again, this is sort of building it up to sort of medium scale mills, which is the type of mills that we're using here to process, to commission our yarns, for example. So yeah. Lovely products here. Love to see wool products for sale in situations like this. So it looks like we've got some duvets here. There's quite a lot of wool duvet companies within the UK these days. Obviously, we've got Bave, which is your local one. and they've generally got a very good story around the reason why they wanted to start. And they've probably, so there's comparisons between using your own fibres or actually wanting to support other sheep farmers in your area. So this one here is the total price for a mini mill. This does not include the actual site, the location, the building, the infrastructure that's needed, the training, all those other sort of points that are very important when you're designing, or looking at the sort of comparability of a mini mill against other processing systems. So these are all the things that we covered back last year. Okay. And because wool washing was such a prominent feature within this report, I wanted to bring into the conversation the two main scouring plants that we have in England. They're only in sort of Bradford or Dewsbury, so in North Yorkshire, which in comparison to where wool does get shipped around the world to be washed, it's actually really just up the road, a couple of hours and you're probably there. And they are, they're two different sort of scouring plants. We've got Thomas Chadwick and Sons, and then we've got Howard Scouring as well, and they're quite similar in size and similar in prices. I mean, I was talking to Howard Scouring just the other day, and they were quoting prices of 50p per kilo to be scouring, which is a long way what a mini mill is going to be able to offer you. And even some of the smaller mills, you're looking at sort of 10 times that price just to be able to wash the wool because of the length of time it takes. So I'm a real advocate for speciality businesses being able to offer you their service. They have put all their time, money, energy into their service, and it's going to be very hard to beat. And also, they are environmentally sound, which is something that I do worry about with wastewater coming out of small processing systems. Is you do have to be very careful. So yeah, we talked about the options of sending up anything 500 kilos right up to 8 tons is what they can sort of offer services to us for. We also introduced this concept. So fibre shed has been around quite a while now. It sort of originated in California, and it's this sort of soil to soil concept where we can source all our sort of clothing and fabrics locally, and they are gentle, light on the land all the way through, have traceability, transparency, various different life cycles perhaps as different products, and then actually they can be returned to the land, and everything is it's not so damaging as some of, if we compare that to the synthetics, which we're all probably wearing some right now because it's really hard not to. So the fibre shed has been gaining momentum in the UK, particularly in the southwest in the last year, which is fabulous because we're part of that. We are having a great time meeting new people, and also having webinars and sort of Zoom meetings where obviously in the last 6 months we've not been able to see each other, but we've had quite a few discussions and welcomed new people. The lady who is behind the Southwest England Fibre Shed has secured some funding, so we're having a meeting very soon to discuss what that might look like, which with a person with land like myself is quite exciting because there's new opportunities, new ideas as we sort of cope with the pandemic. We look to other sort of areas. And I know that there's some people in Wales that are very, very interested in the Fibre Shed initiative. So I do believe that, I would encourage all of you to really follow that up, because I think it would be very, very rewarding for Wales in particular. So yeah, it's great. This is one of my favourite quotes. So I've met Andy, and I really, really love this. It just goes to show that humans really are not that sensible at times, and we can't see the wool, because it's when it's right in front of us, you know, pull the wool over your eyes is, you know, is exactly what we need to be doing to see what resources we have got that are naturally occurring. And, you know, one of my favourite strap lines is wool is the ancient fibre of the future, and it's the forgotten fibre. And we need to start thinking at it and looking at it from a scientific point of view, which is great that you're going to have some future webinars which are really looking at the science behind wool. And so these were just some of the examples that I wanted to bring, just to get people to think very differently, that wool is not just suitable as a textile ingredient. So we kind of come to some conclusions here, because which was very much designed around the actual brief that we were given. And so just as a recap, you know, Wales has got a very important percentage of the UK wool clips. So, you know, you definitely have the ability to do quite a lot of projects if you feel the need arises. I think a lot of the issues, talking to processors, and the idea of hemp being removed from the sheep is really not an option. And because it's a specialist fibre, I think if we could encourage products that need hemp, then you definitely can maintain that niche product, rather than trying to compete with something that is low micron and sort of next to skin. Hemp can offer you so many different sort of product variations to what's on the market already. We did talk a little bit around Welsh wool branding, and whether that is soil or whether it is breeds, because obviously meat production has incorporated quite a few of the English meat producing or even continental meat producing qualities. So I think there's perhaps an umbrella that's can be Welsh wool, but under that you've got lots of different breeds and areas and regions, so that you definitely can maintain that Welsh wool branding. And I think the Fibre Shed initiative would really help bring that forward. So, we looked at the difference between a Kiwi scour and a mini mill, or processing it sort of on more industrial levels. And that those, you know, there's still always room for more research and development, certainly around environmentally safe products. And, you know, as an add-on to that, I think transporting food has always been one of my passions with wool. I think there's lots of potential with food being transported using wool, just because of its thermoregulating, but also its shock absorbency. And with all these home deliveries that are probably about to start happening even more again, you know, I do think that food, you know, transport and food safety and security is brilliant, and wool's got a future there somewhere. So yeah, that was our conclusions. This goes back to what does the Welsh wool sort of look like, and then we've got these things. But if we fast forward to this fantastic year of 2020 and the introduction of this sort of global pandemic, and these are just some of the headlines that we were faced with sort of back in March or April and June. And, you know, this is what has prompted quite a bit of feather ruffling amongst the sheep farmers and the sort of wool buying, British wool and various other sort of merchants. It's a really difficult scenario. These sort of headlines don't help farmers really understand what's going on, I don't think. And, you know, this is a global pandemic. It is not an internal sort of problem within the UK. If we can just go on to the next slide. And so we could just go on to the next one. I'll just pop back to this one in a minute, Geraint. So, oh, sorry, next one again. We'll just... This one here, it's this is what I wanted to talk to you. This one relates to those sort of headlines that we were faced with, and exactly what sort of happened since March, in that it actually started back in January because obviously COVID-19 was happening in China, and you can see here that it starts dropping. And this is the price of, this is an average sort of price that British Wool have on their website as a wool price indicator. So you're looking at 86 pence, and then it slips and slips and slips. And this is because China was going into their own lockdown. And as we all know, China are the main sort of wool buyers, the wool processors and the wool users. And so once production is sort of ceasing over in China, then the demand goes down. And then we can see here in March that we drop right down to the 66 pence, and that there is no price for clean wool, because that's an indicator of the fact that we went into a 3-month lockdown. And so there was no processing, there was no manufacturing, there was no demand for wool, as the world sort of almost closed, as we all know. So I think it's really important to sort of understand what that actually means for a global commodity. And some of those headlines bounding around, you know, I don't think were very helpful. I don't think they instilled the right sort of voice from sort of, you know, what the farmers were sort of having to face with it. You know, some farmers have understood it. Some people have, you know, felt like, you know, we could have been, you know, perhaps wool buyers could have been doing a little bit more, but it is, you know, the global pandemic has reduced demand. And although it might be picking up again now, we've just gone into another lockdown here, or we will be, and I know you're in one at the moment as well. So people are not out buying, and so that demand will take a long time to recover. Obviously, unemployment and food security, these things are perhaps more important than going out and buying some new clothes and some new carpets. And so we have to be aware of what, you know, the words global pandemic mean to, you know, something that is sold as a worldwide commodity. So if we just go back a couple of slides, thanks, Geraint. So I think I've always want to be optimistic, and I think what's been really fantastic to see this year is there was lots of talk again, oh, there's not going to be enough sheep shearers to get the sheep shorn in the UK. And so British Wool were very sort of active and created this sort of register of sheep shearers and wool handlers. And, you know, at the end here, they've written a thank you note at the end of the sheep shearing season, because I think it goes to show that as an island, we can do a lot of the things that we rely on other workers for. And it's very good that the sheep shearing industry has actually demonstrated this. I know it's not quite as easy as with some of the other industries like fruit picking or harvesting and things, but you know, as a part of the farming community, I think we should be really pleased that we've given lots of young and older sheep shearers the opportunity to take a stand, and they've had a very successful sheep shearing year. Because if we haven't got the sheep shearers, then, you know, the sheep have got a welfare issue and there is no wool clip to speak of as such. So on a plus side, I think we need to be really take some lessons from what a pandemic can bring. You know, there is always good that comes out of some sad situations. So the next slide. So I also think talking about wool is brilliant. If we're not talking about it, then, you know, we're not making any sort of progress. And so it was really interesting to see this simple guide that was out in national press, you know, Farmers Weekly, and how they have really listed the options available to sheep farmers for their 2020 wool clip. So this is available online if people want to read the full version of it, but it just goes to show that if we're talking about it, things will change. So. And the next slide. And the next one. So just as the final slide, I just wanted to bring to your attention that we are very excited in the southwest here because we are going to have a new mini mill that is opening in Dorset. So this is a young farming family. They are sheep farmers and they have spent a long time researching their desire to, set up a new mini mill, which is exactly the same as what we've been looking at in those previous diagrams. It might not be the same equipment, it might not be the same layout, and certainly if you look at the £350,000 investment, that goes to show you can look at all the equipment, but actually the overall costs do escalate. But I just think this is a really positive thing, and I think it's something that, again, could be used as a case study, could be helpful to some other cooperative or some other group or some other farmer over in Wales that wants to sort of look at adding value to wool. And, the fibre sheds, it will help the fibre shed here in the southwest England, so it would also help a fibre shed over in Wales if it was to sort of take place. And I think what's really good in my mind is that they're looking at just focusing in on sheep's wool, but they're not disposing of the idea of they might do some other fibres. And the fact that they've got their own product idea in mind as well, so that they have got a core product as well as relying on, other people sending in their fibres. So I think some of the main issues was actually researching the equipment. Funding was a problem, which I do believe it's because sort of the rural development sort of funding is really quite hard to apply for. Everyone says, go for all these growth development sort of fundings, which you might not be aware of. Maybe they're just an England thing, but you kind of jump through hoops, and at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to go it alone. So I think it's really interesting to see how, as I say, a young farming family have taken this plunge. So yeah, I think it's really good, and it's a good example of what can happen when you're determined to think about adding value to wool. Yeah.
Champion. Diolch o galon, Jen. Thank you very much. That was a fascinating 40-45 minutes. I'm going to go straight into questions and comments. Os gan rhywun gwestiynau neu sylwadau, da ni yn bang on ar yr amserlen, lle mae gennym ni gan amser I gael sgwrs. Ond cofiwch hefyd fod y pedwerydd sesiwn yn y gyfres yma, mi fydd hwnnw I gyd ar gyfer bowtio syniadau, sylwadau, mwyn adnabod syniadau posib fysa lider yn gallu gefnogi i'w beilota yn y dyfodol. Mae'n cynnwys lider yn Ynys Môn a lider yn Ngwynedd, sef pot o arian I ddatblygu syniadau arloesol yng nghefn gwlad Gwynedd a Môn. Diddorol gweld y chat, mae gennym ni amrywiaeth o bobl yn ymuno efo ni o Môn, Gwynedd a Lly Hwnt, croeso cynnes iawn I bawb. Wedyn mae croeso chi roed eich cwestiwn ar y chat, eich sylwadau ar y chat, neu os oes modd I chi gael fy sylw fi, mi na I fod y ddistaw a caniatáu chi drafod yn uniongyrchol efo Jennifer wrth gwrs. Felly byddech chi gael fy sylw fi os ydy hynny bosib. Yw'n un o'n digwyddiad arferol yn gallu cynnig panad I chi fel mae'r un chi'n cael panad bach reit neis rwan. Diolch yn fawr I chi myfanwy am ymuno efo ni. Mae myfanwy'n gadael rwan. Os yna rhyw sylwadau neu rhyw gwestiynau I Jennifer tra mae'n ymuno efo ni heno yma ar y Zoom. Dwi'n mynd â rhyw ddistawrwydd bach eitha amiliad, achos wrach yn caniatáu I bobl sgwennu. Reit, Hyw, da chi efo cwestiwn neu sylwad I Jennifer neu fyna, a wedyn da chi tynnu mute I ffwr o'ch system chi. Ac I ffwr o chi Hyw, diolch yn fawr.
Da chi'n clywed o'n dach?
Yndan.
Iawn, dwi'n ymddiheuro, dwi fan hyn ar iPad, a wedyn sgenna i ddim byd i sgwennu ymlaen, felly dwi'n methu cyfrannu fel cwestiynau yn ysgrifenedig. Licio gofyn fyswn i, Jen, pa mor gynaladwy yn ariannol mae hi'n gweld prosiectau fel Ciwi Sgywr, lle o ystyried bod mae 'na ddau gwmni yn Swydd Efrog hefo darparu, mae gennyn nhw gyfleustera sgwrio fannu, ac ar hyn o bryd dydy'r ddau waith sgwrio yna yn sicr ddim yn gweithio i'w llawn potensial. Un lein dwi'n meddwl sgen Thomas Chadwick yn gweithio yn Dewsbury ar hyn o bryd. Ydy'n gweld pethau unedau bychan fel yn gynaladwy pryd mae cael arbedion maint, economies of scale os liciwch chi, mae hwnna'n ffactor yn anffodus sydd yn codi ben wrth redeg lot o fusnesau heddiw, lle dydy.
Diolch o Galan Huw. Adael i Jen ymateb wrth gwrs. Jennifer?
Thank you for your question. So when we did our presentation, we were, I think we were very clear that our research had shown that both Haworth and Chadwick's are not running at full capacity, and they certainly won't be right now, and that the investment that they have made into the environmental treatment of the wastewater was absolutely huge. And it's something that, did you really want that in Wales? So I was very clear about my sort of writings that actually I think it's not for the faint-hearted. I think there is huge implications for that wastewater. I do little bits of washing here, but what worries me more so than anything else is all the insecticides that get put onto the sheep. And, if you're a small-scale scourer, I worry about whether people would actually wear the right personal protective equipment, and then also the treatment of that. Where does that water go? And so I was very, hopefully I was quite geared towards suggesting that Dewsbury and Bradford are very, very close to North Wales. And I think that if you can gain, more than 250 kilos, which is not a lot of volume of wool, then they would give you a very good price and a very good service for that wool. And what I would really encourage is getting it washed in sort of the north of England, maybe even get it combed or processed into some other product, and then bringing the washed wool and bringing it back into North Wales, and finding skilled labour or training labour to be skilled to create finished products, so that you could then sort of have safe working environments, safe products, and also you could build a really nice business. And I think Bave in particular have demonstrated that process. And so yes, I am in agreement with your sort of suggestions that I would always encourage people to use a very specialist service and focus more on sort of manufacturing of the finished item, because you're going to find more people interested in that type of work, and the wages will be higher as well, and there's less environmental risk. So yeah.
Carwch ymlaen Huw, mae'n drwg neu.
Swn i jyst yn licio ychwanegu, dwi'n meddwl fod cwmnïau fel Thomas Chadwick a Howard Scowering i'w canmol am y gwaith maen nhw wedi gorfod i wneud yn dod i fyny i fedru cyfarfod safonau efo'r amgylchedd, A mae'n siŵr braidd bod yna lefydd sydd yn sgwrio gwlan ar draws y byd, lle nad ydy'r rheola ddim cweit mor llym, ond dwi'n meddwl bod y byd yn ar y deg yn dal i fyny hefo'r gofynion mae raid i fyddhau iddyn nhw. Ond dwi'n meddwl mae'r hyn sgan y diwydiant gwlan fwyaf ei angen ar hyn o bryd ydy rhywbeth sy'n mynd i ychwanegu gwerth. Mae lot o sôn am wneud mwy o ddefnydd o wlan ar gyfer insiwleiddio tai. Ac heb amheuaeth mae angen hyrwyddo hynny. Mae'n sôn am felly wneud o falle i ddefnyddio peth o'n fynd i fod yn gompost. Mae hynny hefyd yn ychwanegu'r defnydd, ond yn y pen draw, pris isel sydd i gael pan mae gwlan yn mynd i'r math yno o ddefnydd. Mae pris gwlan mynydd, fel mae Jen wedi sôn, yn drychinebus o isel ar y funud. Ac felly y farchnad garpedi sydd wedi bod yn rhoi y gwerth ychwanegol iddo fo, ac ar hyn o bryd mae'r diwydiant lletygarwch, mae'r holl longau, pleser, cruise liners, mae'r rheina i gyd yn sefyll, ac yn sicr llefydd fel meysydd awyr, casinos ac yn y blaen sydd yn defnyddwyr contra carpets mawr oherwydd y footfall da ni'n alw fo, ynde. Mae'n gyfnod heriol a'r gyfyngus nid y gwir, ac yn anffodus yn hyn i gyd y Covid sydd mae'r ffaith rwan bod ni'n mynd i ail gyfnod o lockdown. Mae hynna gyfnod clo, lle mae hynna wedyn yn meddwl bod galwn ni ar madro Saesneg market recovery yn mynd yn bellach yn dydy, ond dyna'r gwir lle. Diolch.
Diolch i chi, Hyw. A wrach, gan fod gynnach chi ddim mor keyboard ydych chi sôn i deipio, sa chi jyst cystal a nodi o lle ydych chi'n siarad heno, a dwi'n iawn i ddweud bod chi'n cynrychioli British World?
Yndi, dwi'n siarad heno jyst lawr y ffordd o lle oedd myfanwyr Lloyd Evans oedd efo ni gynharach yn Rhydymain ger Dolgellau. Dwi'n cynrychioli Gogledd Cymru efo British Wool, ac o bosib i chi, Jen, dwi'n neud yr unig gwaith yma ac mae Alan Marshall lawr yn Holsworthy yn dyfnaint yn neud i chi yn y de-orllewin.
Diolch galon Hyw, a gobeithio fod chi'n gallu muno efo ni yn rhai o'r gwebinarau eraill hefyd.
Dwi'n gobeithio byddai Geraint.
Ia, diolch yn fawr, achos byrdwn o ran líder ac Arloesi Gwynedd Wledig, Arloesi mond i cynnal sgwrs i weld os a rhywbeth sy'n bosib i wneud i taclo'r heriau anferthol mae ydych chi'n sôn. Ac i ategu be oedd Jen yn sôn efo'r proses gwrio, mi oedd o yn rhan eitha blaenllaw yn y briff edrych i fewn i hwnnw ac dod i gasgliad nath y gwaith fod trio sefydlu uned sgwrio yng Ngwynedd neu yn Argos ddim yn gynaladwy yn ariannol, economaidd nac yn amgylcheddol, yn arbennig trafod yr opsiwn o gludo'r gwlan i fyny i Ogledd Lloegr yna lle fo'r ddau gwmni yna ynde. Os oes sylwadau neu cwestiynau gan eraill? Neu os rhywun eisiau postio cwestiwn neu ymholiad ar y chat? Byddwn ni'n annog chi os oes na, achos mae Jen yma efo ni. A dos yn ffaith beth y cwestiwn gwirion. Mae bob cwestiwn yna yn dda i'w atab. Nid ar y stage yma lle da ni chwilio am ddatrysiadau neu syniadau gwreiddiol i drio gweld sy'n bosib datblygu gwerth.
Wel, jyst sylw ydy hyn, Geraint. So ni jyst yn licio i'r neges fynd i Jen. Dwi'n meddwl bod ei gwybodaeth hi o'r diwydiant gwlan yn drwyadol tu hwnt, felly mae'r ffeithiau ar flaenau bysedd hi a mae'n bleser gwrando arni hi yn rhoi di neges drosodd.
Champion.
Thank you.
Diolch i chi Hyw. Yeah. A dwi'n cofio, dwi'n siŵr oeddech chi draw yn Borthmadog pryd gafon ni'r sesiwn yn allynydd hefyd oeddech. Yeah, diolch. Cwestiwn gan Milfyn. Jennifer, can you see that? That's just been posted in the chat. Milvyn Williams. Would it be worth posting the adbots on social media to promote the use of wool and educate the versatile uses? So these are the adbots, I think, that you shared right at the start of your talk.
Yeah, okay. So, as I say, they were from the campaign for wool, 10 reasons to choose wool or love wool. And they were commissioned by the Bath and West, which is the sort of Royal Bath and West showground, where Andy runs the sheep shearing competitions or helps run the sheep shearing down there. And so I was there thinking, okay, there's all these people coming through the shearing pavilion and nobody's actually mentioning the wool. So, and I've done lots of crazy sort of craft activities and, you know, talked about wool wherever I can. And actually, I think it might be time to renew them, because I think we could actually find some really, really different and good examples of other UK companies. So yeah, I think, you know, that you're right. I think we do need to do more work on putting wool in front of people's eyes in as many different locations as we can. And I actually think this year and during lockdown, I think people have just got a lot more brain space to absorb new concepts this year. We've been approached by many different people, and as you were saying, you know, there is lots of places, you know, bars, clubs, hotels, big sort of ships, and nobody's on them. And I've lost my sort of events business this year, and I've just had to sort of close my accommodation units again for the next month. And so I think, you know, for everybody, myself included, you know, this global pandemic, it does change and it does allow different thought processes. And I really do think this year in particular, people will be really looking out for something that inspires them, a good story of something that they can believe that's sort of very, very truthful, transparent all the way through the processing chain is really important. And so, yeah, we've been working on our sort of holistic management and our regenerative agricultural approaches onto how we manage the land here. And we've had a very different group of people that have been able to come and see us between sort of July and sort of now. Normally we have wedding guests that aren't really bothered about what farm they're on because they're all partying. And this time we've had lots of young families come and stay. And, you know, they've really absorbed the environment and what we're trying to sort of share with our messages. And I think, you know, certainly with Wales, you've got that opportunity because of all the big green spaces. And, you know, that's what we're all going to be looking for. Because I don't think many people are going to be getting on an aeroplane soon, are they? So I think, you know, now is the time to, you know, really sort of share our stories and our passions and reasons for doing what we do. And sheep, you know, everybody loves a sheep, don't they?
And yeah, and maybe I think maybe this might be part of the background to Melvin's question. This we could maybe borrow the ideas on that board and put them maybe Ellen on the social media. Between these webinars as well to encourage interest and thought, because they're telling an amazing fact about wool, aren't they?
Yeah, and also I think with your questionnaire that you did as well, I mean, you came up with 8 words, didn't you, that were sort of how you see wool in the next 10 years, wasn't it? Somewhere in the report we've got our sort of 8 words maybe. I think maybe you could do your own. And you could use it as a questionnaire, certainly around lockdown, to bring people together, because if nothing else, we really need our neighbours right now, don't we? Sort of processing and sort of communicating with each other is our future. So, but I'm very happy to, to sort of come up with some ideas around that. And someone said to me the other day, we all should write a poem. So maybe, someone could do a poem, and it's all around your Welsh wool brand, really. Yeah. Well,
yeah, I think if we can't do some poetry, then in this area, neck of the woods, I think nobody can. There's plenty of poets.
Totally agree.
There's plenty of poets. I'm not qualified, but I think there are people in the community who are qualified. Yeah. Nia's adding to that, yes, and that the board might attract some interest from outside usual suspects, as it were. We did notice that there is a large, I wouldn't say it's underground, but it's maybe not appreciated, the large community of crafters that we have in the area as well, and they might not be consuming lots of wool each, but together they are looking for substantial amounts of high quality wool. I think that's something we uncovered, wasn't it, Jen? We've got a question here from Shani. Yeah.
Go on, carry on. Yeah.
We've got a question here as well from Shani Rudd, I think from Avoyl, and just south east of Gwynedd, with a developed interest in wool over the last few months. It's clear that there are a lot of small wool businesses around. Do you think that the lack of processing mills stops them from scaling to be bigger, Jen?
It's a difficult one. There is a few processing mills around, and this year, obviously, they went through the same problems as we all did. So they had 3 months, perhaps, where everything had to stop. And, to sort of gain momentum after that takes quite a long time. People are still furloughed, people are still shielding, aren't they? And I know from adding sort of value to our own fleeces this year, as an example, my raw wool sales have been pretty dire, to be honest. But I've actually sort of added more value by having lots more yarns commissioned this year, which is fabulous. And, I'm not really, I kind of know why. I think it's momentum of having a business that's in year 5 or 6 now. I think it's confidence. I think it's people sharing their trust in us as a brand. But I also think it's because people have got more time for crafters. People are at home, and they're going to be able to, put more time to the things that they perhaps want to do or feel that they can only do now because of that. And that obviously puts more pressure on these small sort of processing units, because we've, the wait time from us sending fleece, for example, to it having returned as yarn is, it is getting longer. And it is a problem, yeah. I don't know how we can speed that along. One of the ways that I've started to do that is I actually use Chadwicks to wash volumes of wool, and so I actually send washed fibres, or I'm actually working with a new company, hopefully soon, which would turn our fibres into tops so that they can go washed and carded, ready to be spun, which would obviously speed up some of these smaller companies that would normally take in greasy wool and do the whole process. So yes, I don't know, it would take a whole new feasibility study to see what was missing, and what what the interest, where the interest might be for something in Wales. But yes, I don't think it's going to get much easier. And the major problem, I think, is that a lot of these sort of medium scale processing units are perhaps run by people that should be retiring. And how do we get new people into the industry? That's always a major problem.
There's 2 further comments and questions on the chat. Can you see those, Jen? One from Gwlân, who is currently supporting a group of farming families, looking at wool in particular. I'm not exactly sure what angle, but she works with Agris Gofyn Farming Connect. Croeso ti Gwen. Then Ellen Duncan, I think from what she said, that she joins us from Swansea. She's a crafter. So I don't know whether you could like to respond to both of their questions.
Okay, yeah. So is this the first one about the misconceptions about sort of vegan wool?
Yes, from Gwen, yes. Yeah. Yes, that's the first one, yes.
I mean, it's laughable, isn't it, really? I mean, how can people be so wrong? I just wonder. You know, we have a lot of vegan discussions because some of the people that would come to the events that we host, some of the festivals, and certainly in the past, some of the greener events that we've done, you know, we've always said to them, well, perhaps you'd like to go and put your tent up in an arable field and just see what that feels like. You know, you'll be surrounded by pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and you'd be sort of, you know, putting your tent up in a muddy field as such. And so we've worked a lot around flipping the sort of conversation, if you like, or the question into what does it look like if you are not producing meat and wool from our land. And so, I mean, I just don't know how people can be so misguided that they can think that, you know, synthetic fibres, but even the chemical synthesis of a natural ingredient such as algae or casein, you know, and even turning bamboo into fabric. Okay, it's great, it's from the fastest growing plant on the planet, but there's a lot of chemical synthesis that goes from turning basically a stick into a yarn. And Tencel is the latest one, which is the sort of the wood fibre one, which, you know, it all looks and sounds fantastic, but the chemical intervention and the, you know, the synthesis that has to go on, you know, it's not going to be rosy, is it, if people actually really want to look at that. And so I always talk about the environmental profit and loss of businesses, which is something that I came across in my Nuffield. That's really gaining quite a lot of memento at the moment. There's B Corporation, which is sort of, it's kind of come over from America, which is where you can be affiliated to be, you know, your traceability and transparency all the way through. And for us, we're looking at regenerative agriculture, and so we're literally in the turf monitoring what is growing on our lands, and water infiltration, carbon sequestering, all of those things. And again, you know, if people start talking about vegan diets and vegan fibres, you know, I can't wait for the question, actually. I really like it. And I think if we're all informed and we're able to get that message out there, then I know I've converted a few vegans back into wool fibres because they're actually horrified at what they're wearing when they're not wearing something that's from an animal. So, and also this year we've just been certified with the Greener World for high welfare, as well as grass-fed and as well as GM-free here. So now we've got the certification body behind us, which is, again, it's an American sort of certification board, but has been active in the UK for 16 years now. And again, you know, if anyone is interested, I can happily put them in contact with somebody, because once you've got some labels behind you, you know, I think it says more than just what the farmer can say. Right. So yeah, that's that question.
yeah, and the question that opens many doors now. And again, you know, similar challenges in other parts of the livestock industry, but the wool one in particular doesn't make a lot of sense, logical sense. But then I guess I think this could be the last question for the session, for the first session of this series. And Jan, that's from Ellen Duncan down in Abertawe. So she's a crafter, and should be really useful to have an easy way of finding which farmers are willing to sell individual small number of fleeces now that the festivals are not running, which I think Ellen used to be getting some of her fleeces. So I don't know whether you've come across ways of getting around that. I'm aware that Facebook has become a very active networking with this more than ever. But what's your thoughts on that, Jenny?
Yeah, I think it's been a growing market. So actually we've been doing this for about 20 years. And so every year we try and improve that. And so I think, as Ellen will know, as a crafter, it's quite important that somebody that's selling those fleeces actually understand what the crafter is looking for. So, you know, it does probably require throwing that fleece onto a grading table, certainly removing the dags, because they're not going to want those. And, you know, they don't want excessively dirty fibres as well. So I think, you know, not something that's tender or, you know, is going to snap perhaps at spinning isn't very good. Something that's already slightly cotted or felted. So I think there's a lot of learning for the farmer to do, because the farmer wouldn't necessarily know all of this unless they were trained. And, you know, so there needs to be a relationship between the sheep farmer and the crafter. Or it's something that we're looking to do. And I have run wool handling courses and wool grading and sorting, and I've chatted to so many people about adding value to wool on farm, and actually it goes a little bit in my report. But since that, you know, we've been doing that sort of, say, for 20 years, and probably formally for about the last 10 years. And then sort of, you know, maybe 5 years ago, I started an online shop so that I could actually start sort of shipping them around up and down the country. And now I ship, you know, the fleeces go all over, which is great. But closer to home, there is some online platforms. Certainly on Facebook, there is lots and lots of fleece groups that you can put a request in for what you're looking for. You can be sort of directed onto people's websites, such as that's my sort of tendency to do that, or people will just list them available, and there's lots and lots of groups around that. And I think there's also a formal sort of fleece shop that's just been announced earlier this year as well, which is where many farmers can put their fleeces for sale. And, you know, so it's a Facebook group that has growers and buyers sort of all on the same group. But to do that locally, you know, it would be fabulous if somebody could do that locally within your area. And, you know, what I would always say is I just cream the crop off. So I only put the best sort of, probably between 15 and 20% of my fleeces go onto our fibre website, and the rest of them, they're still good, but they would be sent up to Chadwick's for scouring, for example, because actually they're a bit ugly. They don't look that pretty. And, you know, if you're going to be selling something to a crafter, you want them to have the very, very best. And, you know, the excitement that, you know, you can see in people's faces when you show them your best fleeces is second to none. So I think, you know, there is ways to do that. And I think if there was one person who was interested in setting up a business doing that, then there's a good enough margin to cover a wage to run that business. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. And there is quite a new example that started in South Gwynedd, just outside Tywyn. Gillian Williams from Arloesi Farm. She's just established the Welsh wool shed, and she's been taken aback by the interest she's had in her Facebook page for fleeces from crafters. So that's another name to have a look at, Ellen, is the Welsh wool shed, and she's on Facebook. And then Gillian and her husband John, along with Arwel, who farms nearby, they have just been given support by leader Arloesi Gwynedd Wledig to look at ways of improving wool quality on their farms by introducing genetics from dual-purpose merino from either Australia or New Zealand. And that's a project that's just starting off now, and that's been piloted under the leader. And we'll be discussing more about that project later on in this series of webinars. You know, there's various ways of framing these challenges, looking at added value, look at the genetics, look at the processing capacity locally. There's so many different angles you can come into this challenge, and we will be sharing more information about the project where John and Arwel and Gillian will be looking to work with Arloesi Gwynedd Wledig to introduce the merino genetics. So just look at a chart as we sort of try and draw things of course. I think, yeah, we're bang on 8:30, so we're roughly where we are, and I think an hour and a half works just nicely, I think, for these kind of Zoom interactions. Felly, ga I ddiolch o galon i Jennifer am ymuno efo ni o bryniau mendip yn Gwlad yr Haf. Efallai, wrach lle mwy adnabyddus ydy mae Jennifer efo'i teulu Andy a'r plant Seth a Kyle yn byw jes uwchben y Cheddar Gorge yn Gwlad yr Haf. A dwi wedi bod yn ffodus iawn cael trulio bach amser efo'r teulu yna ar y ffarm yn bendigedig. Mae'n werth mynd yna, ac gobeithio pryd pethau'n agor eto. Cofiwch amdan Jennifer, Fernhill Farm ydy'r busnes, ac yn cynnig lletygarwch bendigedig yn fanna, jyst tu allan i Bryste. Edrych ar y chat eto. No, diolch Elen, thank you Elen for those comments. Thank you Gwen, and then thank you all, Gwen, Sioni, Elen, Sean, Dafydd, Melvin, Nia, Hugh, wrth gwrs Elin am groesawu ni. Ddylwn ni hefyd diolch o galon i Rhiannon sydd wedi bod yn brysur yn cyfieithu yn ystod y sesiwn. Diolch o galon Rhiannon am wneud y gwaith yn gystal ac yn mor hwydd. Mae'n amlwg wedi gweithio yn gwbl ddiffwdan. Diolch o galon Rhiannon. A wedyn, fydd y sesiwn nesaf am 7:00 nos Lun nesaf, lle bydd Elfed Jones o Gwlân Gwynedd y Môn yn ymuno efo ni, a brawd y chwaer Sarah a Joe o Northumberland. Fydd yn rhannu profiadau nhw yn gwerthu cnu cyfa ar-lein i grefftwyr. Felly ymunwch efo ni am 7:00. Na i basio'r awena nôl rwan i Elin sy'n mynd i gloi'n ffurfiol cyn i ni ffarwylio'n gilydd go iawn.
Ie, a diolch yn fawr iawn am hynna, a diolch i mond i trio ategu be oedd gen Geraint i ddeud, rili. Diolch i bawb am ymuno, diolch yn fawr iawn i Geraint am arwain, a diolch yn ofnadwy i Jen hefyd am ymuno efo ni. Oedd o'n ddifyr iawn cael gwybod yn union beth sy'n mynd ymlaen, rili, a jyst cael cychwyn y trafodaeth yma i ffordd oedd yn eisiau chi. Felly, ia, fatha edo Geraint, newch yn siŵr bod chi'n ymuno efo ni wrthnos nesaf ac yr wythnosau sydd i ddod. Gobeithio nawn ni weld chi eto. Diolch.
Wel fawr de, os awch i chi gyd.
Os dawch.